Okay, today we're going to read Reddit stories. I'm specifically going to read stories from the Reddit NoSleep. And I haven't read through this story before, so we're going to experience it together. Okay, so the title of this story is My Roommate Has Been in the Shower for More Than 4 Hours. So I got home around 11 p.m. Late night at the office turned into an even later night at the bar. About 4 drinks deep at this point, and I'm tired. Just about ready to fall asleep as I stumble through the doorway. I lay down on the couch and reach for my bag of joints and spark one up as I pull up YouTube on my laptop. I'm in the middle of watching some luxury cruise tour, close to passing out, when I hear the front door open. I sit up and turn my head slightly, just enough to see my roommate coming in. He hangs his jacket in the closet and doesn't say anything and just walks slowly to his room, which is normal enough. I'd been living with him for about 3 months, long enough for me to pick up on most of his tendencies. The guy doesn't really talk unless spoken to, which was far from a problem for me. He also generally kept things clean on his end, never causing much in the way of problems. I couldn't really complain. So I go back to watching YouTube, and about 5 minutes later, I hear the shower in his room turning on. Once again, nothing strange. At this point, I'm watching bare-knuckle boxing highlights with my eyes half open, maybe 1 or 2 minutes away from passing out. I remember waking up in darkness, my head hurting, my throat dry as hell. I sat up slowly, waiting for the grogginess to settle into something manageable. Once it did, I grabbed my phone and checked the time. Around 3:30 a.m. from what I remember. I was starving, and so I got up, began walking towards the fridge, and then I noticed it. A soft but ever-present noise in the background. It took me a few seconds to really recognize what it was. The shower. Suddenly, the events of last night began replaying in my head. Drinking at the bar, Ubering home, laptop, couch, my roommate coming home, the shower turning on. I stood there for a while trying to make sense of it. Maybe he went to bed and forgot to turn it off? I shook my head. There's no way that happened, I thought. Maybe he slipped and fell. Realizing the implications of this, I rushed towards his room, but found his bathroom door locked. I began pounding on it. "Hey man, you all right?" No response. I considered kicking the door down, but decided to call 911 before I did that. I took my phone out, preparing to dial, when I noticed that I had an unread text. One from my roommate. "Hey man, I couldn't sleep, so I went over to my girlfriend's place. Not sure when I'll be back." Sent 2 hours ago. I look at the bathroom door, then back down at my phone. Everything about this was wrong. First of all, my roommate barely texts me, and certainly never to tell me when he's going out. Second of all, I know for a fact that he's single and has been for a while. And third of all, who the fuck was in the shower then? I tried calling him, no answer. I sent him some texts, but no response. I walked over to his desk and saw that his keys and wallet were still beside his laptop. My head started to spin at this point, and I get out of there, go back into the living room, and turn on the lights. I'm pacing around in a circle, trying to follow the plot, whilst also trying to ignore the shower. A noise that I never could have imagined being so dreadful in any context. Sometime later, I hear something vibrating on the kitchen counter. I move towards it and see that it's a phone. It's my roommate's phone. The panic begins setting in, and I immediately grab my keys and run out of the apartment. I make my way down the hall and take the stairs down to the lobby, but even that doesn't seem far enough away, and so I make my way over to the McDonald's across the street. I sit there for a while, considering calling the cops, but for some reason feeling too nervous to do so. But even though there's hardly anybody in there, the place begins to feel suffocating, and I decide to leave, walking back out onto the empty streets. Almost immediately, I get this feeling that I'm being watched, and I feel my gaze drifting up and towards the apartment. Soon, I'm looking at my balcony, and I see somebody standing there. A dark figure stood completely straight, stiff to the point where it nearly resembles a mannequin, but it isn't one. If I look closely, I can see it just slightly swaying. I froze in place. My mind hardly able to understand or accept what I was seeing. It's not my roommate. It's too tall. In fact, it's too tall to be anybody I know. Its head nearly scraping the bottom of the balcony above. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't make out any of its details. The darkness and distance may have been enough to explain that away, but there was something about it that drove me towards a different conclusion. That this thing simply possessed no details that could have been observed, that the only elements of its composition was that of unadulterated darkness. Of course, my gut instinct was to get the hell away from it, but the voice in my head was telling me that if I were to try and run, this thing would end up following me. I went back into the McDonald's instead, locking myself in the bathroom as I finally dialed 911. I told the operator that somebody had broken into my place, but that I had gotten out of there without them noticing, but that they were still in there. It was the story that most accurately represented the situation without making me come across as batshit. The operator told me that they'd be sending someone over and for me to hang tight. I left the bathroom, waiting at the table closest to the exit until I could see the red and blue lights cutting through the darkness. I went outside to meet the cops, looking up at the balcony to find it empty, though the door to the living room had been left open. They pelted me with a bunch of questions that I found it difficult to answer. Is the intruder armed? Do I have any idea who it might be? What are their intentions? I told them I didn't know, that I couldn't figure it out, but they just kept on asking. Soon, I was practically yelling at them to go up there and check it out for themselves, and I suppose the terror in my voice was enough for them to begin taking this seriously. They told me to wait by the entrance, and I watched on as they entered the building. I was out there for a long time, growing increasingly anxious at the thought of what they were going to tell me when they came down. A few minutes later, the silence was broken by a single, muffled gunshot. My heart dropped into my stomach, and I continued to wait there, unsure of what to do otherwise. 20 more minutes of silence, and the officers still hadn't come down. Soon, I could hear more of them approaching in the distance. Before I knew it, 4 more cop cars had pulled up around me, and the scene had fallen into chaos. Officers shouting over each other and into their radios, more questions being hurled my way, none of which I was able to answer. The next few sequences were mostly a blur, but I remember the building being evacuated, the tenants frightened and confused as they were ushered outside while the officers became more and more frantic. I remember hearing more scattered gunshots, some screaming, other noises that were difficult to make sense of. There were a few lapses in my memory after that, but I recall being pushed into the back of a police car. After being driven to the station, I was led into one of the interrogation rooms where I found 2 nondescript men in suits waiting for me. They didn't introduce themselves and immediately went into a series of questions, each one more bizarre than the last. What company was your roommate employed by? What was the nature of his job? How many different people have been inside your apartment since your roommate moved in? Have you ever heard voices inside the apartment from the hours of midnight to 3 a.m.? Voices that did not belong to your roommate? Have you ever seen a circle of people standing outside of the apartment from the hours of midnight to 3 a.m.? People that were exceptionally tall. And one of the most unsettling ones. Have you ever seen somebody standing at the foot of your bed upon waking up between the hours of midnight to 3 a.m., only for them to disappear moments later? If so, do you remember what they looked like? Any distinct features? As they continued probing me, my mind began conjuring up some of the strange shit that had happened after my roommate had moved in. Shit that I had written off as figments of my imagination simply because I had no other explanation for them. I did hear the voices, always coming from the room next to mine where my roommate slept. I was always so tired when I heard them, but I do remember it's either sounding like a young woman or a man with an extremely deep voice. I could never make out any words. It always sounded like gibberish. And then there was that one time where I went to the bathroom in the middle of the night. Still half asleep, I didn't bother turning on the lights as I entered. But as my eyes began adjusting to the dark, I could have sworn that somebody was already sitting on the toilet. Somebody extremely tall. Of course, when I turned on the lights, nothing was there. It was easy to chalk it up as a product of late night drowsiness at the time, and I had never really thought about it since. After doing my best to give them useful information, the suits spent a good few minutes taking notes on their phones. Once they were done, they sat up quickly, told me that they'd be in touch before leaving the room. A cop came in a few minutes later and told me that since I couldn't return to the apartment, they would set up a nearby hotel until they were able to get the situation under control, and that I should stay put until they gave me a call. What happened? I asked him. What did you guys find there? He stared at me for a long time, not as if he were in deep thought, but as if he held deep aversion for what he was considering telling me. Eventually, he just shook his head. I don't know, he said. I mean, I really don't know. I nodded, tried to smile, though I'm sure it didn't come across very well. It's the next day now, and I'm in the hotel. Of course, I couldn't sleep, couldn't really eat. The officer hasn't called me yet. When I try searching up information about the evacuation on the internet, all I can find are articles claiming that it was due to a fire. A fucking fire. Update. I fell asleep and I just woke up. It's 1 a.m. now, and I can hear the shower. That was good. I really like that one. I'll be honest, I do like when there's a bit more of a conclusive ending, but that was still good. That one kind of slayed, no? Okay, next story. Again, I haven't read this through, so we're going into this blind together. My husband insists on keeping this one painting of a woman. That's the title. When my husband and I first got married and moved in together, we had a few fights. On personal space, on chores, and on decor. Namely, my husband insisted on keeping this weird painting of a woman. Who is she? I'd asked when I first saw it, leaned against a mountain of moving boxes. I don't know, I got it at a rummage sale. It was an original painting, oil, I think, judging by the way the light reflected off the brushstrokes. It depicted a young woman standing in a dark room, looking over her shoulder at the viewer. She was actually rather beautiful, blonde hair falling over her shoulders like a waterfall, a white cotton dress, a dainty heart-shaped face that was somehow haunting rather than cute. She was illuminated brightly, but the room behind her was dark. The contrast and her pose reminded me a little bit of Girl with a Pearl Earring, but it didn't feel classy or pensive or beautiful. Instead, it felt creepy. Especially because my husband insisted on hanging it above our bed. I mean, it's a beautiful painting, I said, but it just doesn't fit with the modern decor. Neither do your Funko Pops. Okay, but they're small. This painting is enormous. For Pete's sake, the woman is nearly life-sized. I want to keep her where she is. It seemed like a big deal to him, so I dropped it, but it wasn't easy. Sometimes I woke up in the middle of the night with a horrible feeling that I was being watched. Then I'd look up and see her hauntingly gray eyes staring down at me. I didn't get much sleep after that, and there was one time I swear she moved. Was her hand always like that? I asked Eric after getting into bed one night. Huh? Her left hand. The fingers are kind of open, reaching out behind her, like she's waiting for someone to grab her hand. Yeah, she was always like that. I could have sworn she wasn't always like that. Then again, I generally avoided looking at the painting. It was so uncomfortably realistic. When I stared into those gray eyes, I almost felt like I was making eye contact with a person. I lasted 2 weeks, then I begged Eric to move it. Can we please move the painting somewhere else? I really hate looking at it when I go to sleep. It's the nicest piece of art we have. It belongs over the bed. What about the sunflower one? That's just a print, he complained. It's so basic. Come on, I'll move my Funko Pops out if you move the painting out. He heaved a long sigh. Fine, I'll move her. That was another thing. He often referred to the painting as her. It was weird. So he moved it to the stairs, but honestly, that was worse. Every time I went downstairs, there she was, staring at me from above the landing with those piercing gray eyes. At least when the painting was in the bedroom, I was usually asleep or facing the opposite direction. I hit my breaking point a few days after that. For some reason, I couldn't sleep. After tossing and turning for an hour, I decided to grab a snack downstairs. I got to the top of the stairs, and there she was. I hadn't turned on the main lights, only the night light in the hall bathroom was on. With everything so dark, the background of the painting melted into the shadows. But the woman still stood out, with her pale face and white dress. And my stupid, sleepy brain interpreted it as if it was an actual person standing there. I jumped about a foot in the air, and I would have fallen all the way down the stairs had I not caught the banister at the last second. "Can we please get rid of that painting?" I asked the next morning. Eric turned away from the stove, set the spatula down. "Why?" "Last night, it scared the frick out of me. I nearly fell down the stairs." He stared at me as if unable to understand. "She scared you?" he asked slowly. "Well, more like startled me. I thought it was an actual person standing there." He looked at me. Then he broke into laughter. And after a few seconds, I started laughing too. It was pretty stupid, now that I thought about it. I know I was sleepy, but still, I thought the painting was a person. What, did I think we were being burglarized by a young, beautiful blonde woman in a nightdress? "For now, I'll move her into my office. Then you don't have to look at her at all." "That sounds good." And for a while after that, things were okay. I sort of noticed Eric spending more time in his office than usual, but he also had a big deadline for a brief coming up. And how would that be related to the painting anyways? It's not like he was staring at her for hours on end. Except that's exactly what I caught him doing. One night, he didn't come downstairs to eat dinner with me. I called up to him a few times, no reply. So I went downstairs and walked into his office to find him staring at her. He was just sitting there with his computer closed, no papers on the desk, swivel chair turned towards the woman in the painting. "Oh," he said suddenly when I walked in. Then he quickly stood up. "I was just about to come down. Just sent in the brief a few minutes ago. They're really happy with it." He smiled broadly at me as if nothing were wrong, then slipped past me. I listened to his footsteps thump down the stairs. Had he actually finished working? Or was he just sitting in there, staring at her? I ultimately decided not to bring it up. The painting was out of my sight, and that was great. Besides, I had bigger fish to fry, like my own deadline coming up for an article I hadn't even started. But then, on Friday afternoon, I accidentally overheard him on the phone. His voice was muffled through the thick wooden door, but it wasn't hard to hear him. He was shouting almost. "I'll have it in by tonight. No, I knew it was due on Wednesday. Well, my wife fell down the stairs. I had to take her to the hospital." Those words sent a chill through me. I barged in. "Why are you lying about me falling down the stairs?" His face paled. He ended the call and turned towards me. "I'm so sorry, Tara. I needed an excuse. I missed the deadline on that brief, and it's my job on the line." "The brief you told me you finished 2 days ago?" He nodded silently. I crossed my arms. "Look, Eric, your work is your business, but we've spent like all of 1 hour together all week because you've been locked in here all day, every day. I mean, are you even working, or are you just sitting in here staring at her?" His dark eyes locked onto mine, and then his voice grew soft. "You're jealous of her." "What?" "You shouldn't be, Tara," he said, stepping towards me. "The painting makes her prettier than she was." I froze, stared at him. Then I finally found the words. "Are you saying this is a painting of someone you know?" "No," he said slowly. "Sorry, I misspoke. I mean, it meant whoever this is a portrait of, I'm sure it's flattering likeness. All portraits are flattering like that. I stared at him, my heart pounding in my chest. Who is this a painting of, Eric? I told you it's not. Eric? I stepped towards him. My legs felt weak, wobbling underneath me. Who is this a painting of? He only shook his head. I couldn't sleep that night. I know it sounds silly being so worked up over a painting, but you have to admit it was weird. He was obsessed with this thing for whatever reason. Why didn't I see the painting when we were dating? Did he hide it away in the basement? That was the one place I'd never been. Had he built a little shrine down there, painting candles, the whole 9 yards? The thought of it made me sick. Is it an ex-girlfriend, an ex-wife even, that he never told me about? Getting a painting commission must have cost a fortune, especially a huge detailed one like this. I mean, as much as I hated that thing, it was clearly done by someone with an incredible gift. The glint in those piercing gray eyes, the small dimple on her right cheek. But clearly he wasn't keeping it to appreciate the artistry. He knew her, and whoever she is, he's obsessed with her. And then I got the craziest idea. I sat up in the bed, slowly, quietly, turned to Eric. He was fast asleep. Then I slipped out from underneath the covers, grabbed my phone from the nightstand, and tiptoed out of the room. My bare feet padded slowly across the hallway as I made my way towards his office. Then I pushed the heavy wooden door open and stepped inside. The office was cold, much colder than our bedroom. Goosebumps pricked up my bare arms, but I didn't waste any time. I reached over, fumbling across the wall, and hit the switch. The light flicked on. The blonde woman stared down at me from the wall. Her eyes seemed to follow me as I took Eric's leather chair and dragged it across the hardwood. Once against the wall, I stepped up onto it. We were staring at each other, face to face. I'd never been this close to the painting before, my face inches from her. This close, I could truly appreciate the detail. Each individual eyelash painstakingly drawn, curving up from its follicle. Thread-like striations of light and dark gray filling her irises. Her skin, so pale and creamy, dotted with the tiniest of pores. But I wasn't here to appreciate the artwork. I lifted my phone and took a photo, and then I brought up reverse image search. It took a few minutes for me to find the right website and upload the photo, but when the results loaded, I gasped. I expected maybe one result, if I were lucky. Some sort of facial recognition that would match the painted face to a photo. Or maybe the artist's website would come up and mention who the subject was. But instead, dozens of thumbnails filled the page of the exact same painting I'd been staring at for weeks. Fingers trembling, I clicked on the first one. It led to a news article. Search continues for missing Franklin art student. My heart dropped. Little black dots danced in my vision. I collapsed into the chair behind me, trembling, and began to read. Anya Kelsing, 23, went missing after a hike with her boyfriend. The two became separated when they came upon a bear. Her backpack was found roughly a mile from where the sighting occurred, but no trace of Anya was found. And the caption under the painting. Kelsing is a third-year student at Franklin College, majoring in fine arts. She recently completed a self-portrait that was exhibited at L'École. I clicked on the next article and the next, but they all said the same thing. Hike, bear, disappearance. All of them showed a photo along with her self-portrait. She looked strikingly identical to her painted likeness. None of them mentioned the boyfriend's name, but it had to be Eric. The most recent article from 5 years ago was a video clip of her parents begging for her search to continue. Sadly, judging by the news articles, it never did. I don't know how long I sat there. All I know is that I was suddenly jolted from my thoughts by a loud thump in the hallway. Footsteps coming towards the office. I shot up. He can't find me here. I glanced around the room, looking for some place, any place that I could hide, but it was probably too late. Surely he'd seen the light on from under the door. I ducked under the desk just as he stepped into the room. Tara? I clapped my hand over my mouth, trying to silence my ragged breathing. He's going to see the chair is out of place. He knows I'm here. He knows. Tara, are you in here? Why did I hide? I could have just said I came in here because I heard a noise, needed a pen, couldn't sleep. Why the fuck did I hide? Now he's gonna know that I know. Tara? Maybe it's fine. Maybe the bear got Anya. Maybe Eric had nothing to do with it. Isn't that more likely than Eric being a murderer? There you are. I looked up and screamed. Eric was crouched there in front of the desk staring at me. I was looking for a pen, I stuttered lamely. I wanted to write down. I remember I have to pick up groceries tomorrow and I needed to add something. He tilted his head, a small smile on his lips. I don't think that's the truth, Tara. Make a break for it. I started to lunge out from under the desk. His hand quickly shot out and grabbed my wrist, hard. You figured out who she is, didn't you? That's the only reason you'd be hiding from me. I trembled in his grasp. What did you do to her? I whispered. He let out a dry laugh. So you think I'm a murderer? How nice. That's the first conclusion you jumped to. No, I don't think you're a murderer, I swallowed. Stupid. If he had killed her, and he knows you know, then you're dead too. I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. Just what happened? They didn't find a body. Did the bear get her? He didn't reply, just stared at me, silently, with those cold dark eyes. I was jealous, I continued desperately. But now I understand. I wish you would have just told me. To lose someone like that, of course you'd want to keep the painting. It's all you have left of her. You should have left it alone, he said, his tone oddly emotionless. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I screamed as he lunged for me. It's over. His hands were clenched tight on my wrists as he dragged me out from under the desk. I pulled back, trying to wrench myself free, but it was no use. Thump. A loud crash sounded behind us. Eric whipped around, and for a split second, his grip released. I acted instantly, pulled free from him, and ran, pivoting around the desk and racing towards the door. As I glanced back, I saw Eric starting after me, but I also saw what had made the noise. The painting of Anya had... Oh my god, I'm getting chills. The painting of Anya had fallen from the wall. It lay askew on the floor, her gray eyes staring emptily upwards. I was always a fast runner. Eric was only halfway down the stairs by the time I was at the bottom. Bursting out into the cold air, I began to scream. He grabbed me from behind and tried to pull me back inside, but it was too late. Lights were flicking on. Our neighbors rushed out of his house, dialing 911. It was over. The police arrested Eric for assault, and once I told them my story of his obsession with Anya's painting, they were able to search our house. And hidden in his office drawer in a small box was a pair of gold earrings, the same earrings Anya wore on the hike that day. The case is slowly mounting against him. I'm hoping, praying Anya gets justice and that a jury convicts him of her horrible murder. And would he have done the same to me if I hadn't escaped? If Anya's painting hadn't fallen off the wall? There was an explanation, of course. When Eric had moved the painting to his office, he'd mistakenly installed one of the hangers into pure drywall. The weight of the painting had caused it to rip out, and the painting fell. But sometimes, I think Anya was watching over me, that her self-portrait carried a piece of her, and that night she'd protected me from falling victim to the monster who ended her life. The painting now hangs up in my foyer. Every day I walk by it, and a new detail pops out at me. The deep, shadowy green of the room behind her, a perfectly painted strand of blonde hair, the glint in her piercing gray eyes, And sometimes I think she's smiling back at me. That one was so good. What the frickin' frack fruik? That one was so good. Damn, that was written so well. Holy moly. Those stories were really good, I think. I really enjoyed that. I hope you did as well. If you guys like that, we will definitely do more of it. I personally, myself, watch a lot of videos of other people reading Reddit stories. So it's nice to do it here as well.